Have you ever looked back and suddenly realized someone probably liked you, yet you completely missed every subtle clue they unintentionally showed? Most people imagine attraction as obvious flirting, romantic gestures, or constant compliments, but real life usually tells a quieter story. Many people try to hide their feelings, believing they appear completely normal, while their everyday behavior quietly reveals everything instead. Some become more confident, while others become shy, awkward, playful, or surprisingly quiet whenever the person they like appears nearby. That's why attraction often becomes easier to recognize through repeated behavioral patterns instead of dramatic romantic moments or declarations. Before we begin, remember that no single behavior alone proves someone likes you romantically, because context always matters. These signs can also appear in friendships, admiration, or naturally warm personalities, so avoid making quick assumptions from one behavior. When several of these behaviors appear consistently over time, however, they may suggest genuine emotional interest worth paying attention to. Let's explore 5 fascinating psychological signs that someone may secretly like you without openly expressing their feelings. Sign 1. They remember the small things. Imagine mentioning your favorite coffee during one random conversation, then completely forgetting you ever shared that tiny detail. Weeks or even months later, they casually mention your favorite drink without needing you to remind them. Maybe they remember your favorite movie, your birthday, your dream vacation, or a childhood story you mentioned only once. Most people hear these details briefly, then quickly forget them because they never become personally meaningful to remember later. Psychology suggests our brains naturally pay closer attention to information connected with people who matter emotionally to us. When someone becomes emotionally important, your attention increases naturally without consciously trying to remember every little detail they share. This isn't necessarily an extraordinary memory. It's often the result of consistently paying closer attention to someone they genuinely value. Think about your own life and the people you care about most every single day. You probably remember their favorite foods, hobbies, birthdays, dreams, and little preferences without making any special effort whatsoever. Meanwhile, you likely forget countless small details shared by acquaintances because your brain simply doesn't prioritize remembering them. Attention usually follows emotional importance, making remembered details one surprisingly meaningful clue that someone genuinely values your presence. Sometimes people don't realize their memory itself quietly reveals feelings they've never actually found the courage to express aloud. The smallest remembered detail can sometimes communicate much stronger emotions than the biggest compliment someone could ever give. When someone remembers little things everyone else forgets, it's worth noticing because consistent attention rarely happens without meaningful emotional interest. The important word here is consistency, because one remembered fact means little, but repeated attention tells a much bigger story. In many cases, people unknowingly reveal their feelings simply by remembering what mattered most to you. Sign 2. They behave differently around you. Have you ever noticed someone acting completely normal with everyone else, yet behaving differently whenever you're around? Maybe they're naturally confident but suddenly become quieter whenever you join the conversation or enter the room. Others who are usually quiet unexpectedly become talkative, energetic, playful, or noticeably more expressive whenever they see you. Psychology suggests attraction often increases self-awareness because people naturally want to make a positive impression on someone they admire. Ironically, trying too hard to appear relaxed often makes people seem less relaxed than they normally would. You might notice nervous laughter, restless hands, or repeatedly adjusting their clothes, hair, watch, or accessories without realizing it. Some people suddenly speak faster because they're excited, while others slow down because they're carefully choosing every word. Eye contact can also become inconsistent as they look at you, then quickly glance away, feeling unexpectedly self-conscious. Others smile much more around you, even when nothing particularly funny has happened during the conversation together. Of course, these behaviors alone don't automatically mean romantic attraction, because personality differences always play an important role. The real question isn't whether they seem nervous, but whether they behave noticeably differently specifically around you. Compare how they interact with friends, coworkers, or strangers, then compare how they consistently behave around you instead. Sometimes the biggest clue isn't the behavior itself, but the dramatic change compared with their usual personality. When emotions become stronger, people often reveal feelings unintentionally through behaviors they never consciously planned to show. Watching for consistent differences over time is much more reliable than judging someone from one single interaction. Sign 3. They find reasons to keep talking. Some conversations naturally reach an ending, yet somehow yours always seem to continue a little longer than expected. Just when you think everything has been said, they suddenly remember another question or another interesting topic. You finish chatting, say goodbye, then receive another message only a few minutes later without any urgent reason. Sometimes they send a funny meme, an interesting article, or a random video simply because it reminded them of you. Other times they ask about your day, your weekend, or your plans, even when the conversation could have ended naturally. The topic itself often isn't important because continuing the connection becomes more valuable than exchanging information alone. Psychology suggests people naturally seek more interaction with individuals whose company genuinely makes them feel comfortable and happy. When someone enjoys your presence, ending conversations may feel surprisingly disappointing without them consciously realizing why. They ask thoughtful follow-up questions because they're genuinely interested in learning more about your experiences, opinions, and everyday life. Instead of giving short replies, they encourage longer conversations by showing curiosity about even ordinary parts of your day. They may remember previous discussions and bring them up later because they genuinely cared about your earlier conversations. Notice whether they consistently create opportunities to talk instead of waiting only for you to initiate every conversation. People rarely invest extra time communicating with someone they have absolutely no interest in getting to know better. Again, this doesn't automatically confirm romantic feelings because close friendships can look very similar in everyday situations. However, repeated efforts to maintain conversations often suggest your presence has become emotionally rewarding for them. Sometimes the strongest clue isn't what someone says, but how consistently they choose to keep talking with you. Sign 4. They notice small changes. One day you get a haircut, but almost nobody notices until they immediately mention something looks different about you. Maybe you wear a new color, different shoes, or a simple accessory, and somehow they notice almost instantly. Sometimes they ask if you're feeling okay before you've even told anyone that something feels slightly different today. Psychology suggests emotional interest naturally increases attention because people observe those who matter more carefully than everyone else. Your brain automatically notices changes in people you frequently think about or emotionally value throughout everyday life. That's why subtle differences become easier to recognize, even when everyone else completely overlooks those same small details. They may notice your hairstyle, your smile, your energy, or even your quieter mood before anyone else does. Perhaps they complement something new that nobody else has mentioned, making you wonder how they notice so quickly. They might recognize when you're unusually tired, distracted, or happier, even without you saying a single word. This isn't because they can read minds or possess extraordinary observation skills beyond everyone else's natural abilities. Instead, they've simply been paying closer attention because your presence has become meaningful in their daily thoughts. Of course, naturally observant people notice details about many individuals, so one example doesn't necessarily indicate romantic attraction. The stronger clue appears when they consistently notice changes about you more often than they notice changes in others. Repeated attention to subtle details often reveals genuine interest long before someone openly expresses their emotions with words. Sometimes caring begins with simply noticing the little things that almost everyone else completely misses. Sign 5. They mirror your behavior without realizing it. One of the most fascinating psychological behaviors is something called unconscious behavioral mirroring during everyday social interactions with others. Imagine you're sitting together and casually leaning forward while telling an interesting story or sharing an exciting experience. A few moments later, they naturally lean forward too, without realizing they've copied your body position almost perfectly. You smile warmly during the conversation, and seconds later they smile in a remarkably similar way without thinking. Perhaps you begin speaking more softly, and gradually they match your tone, pace, or overall speaking rhythm too. Researchers have found that people naturally imitate those they feel comfortable, connected, or emotionally engaged with over time. This usually happens automatically because our brains unconsciously create stronger social bonds through subtle, synchronized behavior. People may mirror your posture, facial expressions, gestures, speaking speed, or even frequently used words during conversations. Most of the time, neither person realizes this matching behavior is happening because it's completely unconscious and natural. Mirroring helps create feelings of comfort, familiarity, trust, and connection between two people sharing meaningful interactions together. It's important to remember that friends, family members, and close coworkers may also mirror one another naturally. That's why mirroring alone should never be treated as undeniable proof that someone secretly likes you romantically. However, when mirroring appears alongside several previous signs, it becomes a much stronger pattern worth noticing carefully. Sometimes the human body quietly expresses emotions that people haven't yet found the confidence to put into words. Our actions often communicate feelings long before our voices are ready to admit what our hearts already know. Human attraction is usually quiet, subtle, and hidden inside everyday behaviors, instead of dramatic romantic moments people expect. Remembering little details, behaving differently, extending conversations, noticing changes, and mirroring behavior together create meaningful behavioral patterns. No single sign guarantees romantic attraction because personality, friendship, culture, and individual differences always influence human behavior significantly. The key is looking for several consistent behaviors appearing together repeatedly instead of relying on one isolated moment. Sometimes people reveal exactly how they feel, not through words, but through small actions they never intended to show. Have you ever realized someone secretly liked you only after looking back and connecting all these subtle behavioral clues? Share your experience in the comments.
Stop chasing motivation. Start understanding your mind. Subscribe to Inner Violet and learn how to think, not just react.